Hey, Facebook family. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks live at 5. How's everybody doing? You good? um, Got a lot to talk about today, but let me start off by saying this. For those of you who are new, welcome. For those of you who don't know and haven't already subscribed, do so to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks podcast on the podcast platform of your choice. I'm on iHeart, Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, Google Podcast. I'm on all of them. Check me out. New content drops every Tuesday. And this week, there was a story that I talked about in detail, if you will, with regards to failure to protect laws. And so I want to revisit that while I'm here with you today. I want to talk a little bit more about how to protect failure to protect laws. And so as you come in, settle down, hydrate. It's hot here. Is it hot where you are? Hey, Barry, you're in San Francisco. Welcome. Welcome to my time zone, dude. I appreciate you being so diligent and so supportive. I appreciate you, Barry. It's hot as all get out. If I could just say that. It's been like triple digit all week here in LA, and it's going to continue over the weekend, and I'm not happy about it. I like it, somewhere around 82, 85, and then after that, it's just stupid to me. So when I get done with you, I'll probably get back on the floor and get under the fan so I can try to keep cool. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about a variety of things. Again, for those of you who are new and don't know, I'm a retired 20-year veteran sergeant of the Los Angeles Police Department, and I am not afraid to pull the covers back, speak to you honestly and truthfully, decipher police code talk when we hear it, and there may be a little bit of that going on today as well, and just speak to you honestly about police culture, police training, police policy, and more importantly, to give you some ideas and clues and tips, if you will, about how to survive police encounters. Because listen, at the end of the day, the goal is for everyone to get home safely. So today I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be updating you on some stories that I've covered before, and also talking about the NYPD made some arrests in that video that went viral. For those of you who've seen it, some NYPD officers were making an arrest, and community members started throwing water on the officers. And I guess that wasn't the first time they started throwing water, because I think it's a little hot in New York as well, right? So police responded to a radio call of a woman who was being assaulted with water, and then officers were in Harlem trying to make an arrest, and they got assaulted with water. So yeah, that's not cool. That's not cool. And I had one of my YouTube, had one of my Facebook family members ask me what I thought about it, and I wasn't really going to speak on it, but I'll speak on it since you asked. Thank you for that. And thank you to my YouTube subbies. Welcome, you guys. I appreciate you having so much dialogue with me on YouTube about the things that I put up. I appreciate your interest, not only in what's going on, but what I have to say about what's going on. And more importantly, I appreciate all of you who take the time to reach out to me through my email account, which is SGT, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks @gmail.com, and share stories with me that are going on around the world that I might miss, because while I might think I'm all knowing, not so much. So I appreciate you guys sharing stories with me. So I'm going to talk again about arrest in NYPD. Detroit Police Department is now using facial recognition technology. Talk a little bit about that. And here locally, for those of you who have a desire to be a police officer, more importantly, a LA County Sheriff Deputy, I got good news for you. Those of you who might have stubbed your toe along the way and got involved in some criminality, yeah, don't automatically assume that, misdemeanor convictions are a disqualifier, right? Like stuff like, DUI and whatever else you might have. Yeah, it's not always a qualifier. Well, let me take that back. It could be, But if you're the sheriff's son, if you're the son of Alex Villanueva, well, then you're good to go. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Again, subscribe to my YouTube, subscribe to my podcast, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. Subscribe, follow me on YouTube, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, and subscribe and follow here on Facebook, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. Hashtag tell a friend. And for all of you that are here, share this on your timeline so that those who don't know about me will get to know about me. And if you see me looking to the right, it's because I'm looking at my I'm looking at my screen to see who's on here and just say hello to a couple of folks. So hey, Eugene, good afternoon, sir. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. Herbert, blessings to you as well. And to my skate wife, Black Dynamite. What's up, sister girl? Thank you for joining me in the midst of all this going on over there in New York with our sister, Crystal. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. So let's get to it. Okay. First story, talked about this on my podcast. I'm just going to share a little bit of something so you know what you missed. But last week, the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals revived a civil lawsuit here in San Diego, California. And this lawsuit involved an officer by the name of Neil Browder, who shot and killed an unarmed man back in April of 2015. And this unarmed individual that was killed, his name is Freedom Nihad. And the long and the short of it is that this thing made it all the way to the appellate court, and they have given kind of the green light for the family to pursue a civil suit because the appellate court says that in the case of Officer Browder, they have several triable issues that are concerning to them, and one is Browder's credibility. The appellate court is concerned about the credibility of the officer. Wonder why? Because we do know from time to time we hear about officers who get caught, falsifying arrest reports and creating probable cause and reasonable suspicion, right? Manufacturing a reason to engage you. And so it kind of sounds like that's what happened here in the death of this young man. The court says that Nihad posed no significant danger when he was shot and killed, and that whatever it was that he was accused of doing wrong, it didn't warrant the use of deadly force. So the officer is also alleged to have not identified himself as a police officer. Now, I don't know if he was in plain clothes or what, but he failed to identify himself. He failed to activate the lights on his car. And so the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal believes that the officer could have used a less intrusive means of subduing Nihad. And so therefore, the civil suit goes on. And so I talk a little bit about that on my podcast if you want to know more about that story. And then also, I started talking to you last week about one of my subbies who shared a very personal story with me about her sister, Tondaleo Hall. And Tondaleo Hall is a 30-something woman who is currently serving a 30-year sentence in Oklahoma. And what happened is that she was in a very abusive relationship. And her boyfriend, father of a couple of her children, her youngest ones anyway, was the abuser, not only of the children, but he also abused Tondaleo. And so this is where that whole failure to protect law comes into play, because while Tondaleo was not accused of abusing her children, she was accused of failing to protect her children. And so I say this because it's very important for anybody who might be involved in an abusive relationship. And abuse is never okay, be clear. Hopefully, if you know someone, or if you're someone who's in a situation like that, you can find support system to help you reach out to people, because when you don't, you could be charged with, and there's about 6 other states that are heavily involved in criminalizing women, mostly, who are victims of domestic violence. And so thankfully for Tondaleo, the district attorney, the current district attorney, the current prosecutor, is working in conjunction, oddly enough, with the ACLU there in Oklahoma to get Ms. Hall's sentence commuted. She's facing 30 years. She's 15 years into this 30-year sentence. And so this current district attorney believes that she served enough time. And listen, the boyfriend, they worked out a plea deal with him as they did with Miss Hall. Now, her plea was what they call a blind plea. And I'm not a lawyer, but I think it means that she may not have understood all of what she was agreeing to in that plea. And because probably in the beginning, she says in her own words that she was still frightened. She was being intimidated in the courtroom in the midst of the proceedings by the father of her children. And so she wasn't honest initially about what was going on. And whatever this blind plea agreement is that she agreed to, when she wasn't honest, the fear was the boyfriend was going to get off. So they in turn made a plea deal with the boyfriend. And I think he got 10 years, but because he had been in custody pending trial, part of his plea allowed him to get time served, which was only 2 years, and then probation. And so he was released. He was released after 2 years. Tondaleo is still in jail 15 years later. And so the ACLU is working with Tondaleo and other victims there in the state of Oklahoma who are facing significant penalties for failing to protect. So if you want to know more about that, do listen to my podcast, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. I talk a bit more about it there, but that's the long and the short of it. And I also tell you the other 6 states where this is going on, because you really need to know about this law. A lot of people, a lot of women are getting caught up. Hey, Janine, a lot of women are getting caught up and are doing some significant time. Hey, Howard, thanks for the words of encouragement and support. I appreciate that. Now, update. Everybody's seen the big brawl that happened at Disneyland a few weeks ago, a week or so ago, right? This was one family that got into this really nasty fight in Toontown. Toontown is where you take the little people. It's where you go with the little kids, right? And they're over there in Toontown just cutting up a brother and a sister and her husband. The video went viral, and at first the family, after they got kicked out of the park, denied that there was even a fight, but so many people had viewed it. And of course, then the police got a chance to view it after they put them out. They got a chance to view the video and identified everybody. And so now several of the family members have been charged with felonies because, listen, some of them were from Compton, and they kept making a point of saying that in the article that I read, that the family was from Compton. I don't know if there was some subliminal message going on with that. One of the brothers, the one that was in the red shirt, that was, I guess, probably the instigator, the one that started it, who's been charged with the most egregious crimes, he's from Las Vegas. But nonetheless, I don't know if they didn't understand that Disneyland is not in LA County, it's in Orange County. And they don't play with Black people in Orange County. So because they don't play, Avery Desmond Edwin Robinson, 35, that's his name, Avery Desmond Edwin Robinson. He's 35 from Las Vegas, and he's been charged with 5 felonies, 5 felonies and 9 misdemeanors. And listen, all of them, I'm sure, will plead to something. Now, it's reported that Avery has a criminal history. They wanted us to know that too. So, he may cop a plea to something to prevent himself from doing some significant time. And he goes back to court on July 31st, I guess, to answer to the charges. But that's what he's facing. Also, felony domestic battery assault with force likely to produce great bodily injury, assault with a deadly weapon, 2 counts of criminal threats, because I think he threatened to kill his sister on the way out the park, in the parking lot, right? And then some other misdemeanor charges. There were some children that were present, so they were charged with child abuse and endangerment, probably for every child that was in the group with the family. They're holding old boy on $1 million bail. He's pled not guilty back in court July 31st. Now, his sister, she's 40 years old. Her name is Andrea Nicole Robinson, and she was charged with 5 misdemeanors, including 4 counts of battery and 1 count of assault. And then her husband, whose name is Damon Petrie, of Compton, they want you to know, has been charged with one misdemeanor count of battery. So sounds like to me, they're just kind of throwing everything at the family that they can, right? You understand that prosecutors like to overcharge. You know that that's a thing, right? They just throw everything at you and scare the bejesus out of you, especially if you've never been in the system, if you've never been to jail and you're facing significant time. Then they just charge you with a whole bunch of stuff, and then hopefully you'll plead to 2 or 3, and maybe you'll get some time, maybe you won't. You'll get a fine and probation and all of that. So if Andrea is found guilty, she's looking at 2.5 years in jail, and her husband 6 months. So you would understand why a couple with small children wouldn't want to have both of them in jail at the same time, right? And so I imagine that they will probably, plead down to something. And, listen, I've got personal experience with a family member over in Orange County, and I can tell you that, when you look like me and you are, doing stupid stuff, and I know somebody who did some stupid stuff in Orange County. I'll just tell you the story real quick. So there was a young man who shall remain nameless, who was in Orange County, Buena Park, with some friends. Somebody asked him to give him a ride to the bank, and the young man gave this person a ride to the bank, and they had a friend with them who the young man didn't know. And long story short, the person that went inside the bank went in and passed a forged check, a bad check, and police were called, and they gaffled up everybody, and these were young people, and so they were very concerned about doing some serious time, because they threw the book at them. They charged them with all sorts of felonies and conspiracies, because it was 3 or 4 people in the car. And when everything was said and done, the person that I know wound up, because it was Orange County and this person did not have a criminal record, had never been in trouble before, stupidly drove somebody somewhere. And listen, how many times have you driven a friend somewhere and they got out and went to the grocery store? Do you know if they went in there, committed a robbery, or if they went in there and bought groceries with a bad check or stolen credit card? Would you know? Probably not. So this young person was charged with several felonies, conspiracy being 1 or 2 of them. And ultimately what the district attorney offered was, if this person pled guilty to being an accessory to vandalism and be placed on probation for 5 years, they would drop all of the other charges. And so, of course, since this young person had never been in any trouble and didn't want to roll the dice in Orange County before a jury of not his peers, he took the plea, pled guilty to being an accessory to vandalism. And when I say vandalism, you understand that's usually like graffiti, right? Like tagging on a building or something like that, or breaking a window. But they were determined to get this young man because he was somebody who looked like me in the system, and because the family didn't want to roll the dice and run the risk of having a jury find this person guilty of conspiracy and all the other things that they threw, pled guilty. Now, everything worked out because this person was not someone who got in trouble on a regular basis. After 5 years of probation, that was that. They have a record. They have to explain that. But my point is, Orange County doesn't play people who look like me. So, yeah, be careful when you're in the OC is all I'm saying. Been a lot going on about the DR. Haven't heard anything lately about alcohol-related deaths, but I am hearing now that there are 19 different people who have been reported to die, this time in Costa Rica. And this alcohol poisoning is coming as a result of some kind of methanol contamination. So somebody is putting methanol in drinking alcohol in Costa Rica. And there have been 19 alcohol poisoning related deaths. Costa Rica has issued a national alert about this tainted alcohol, and so am I. Summertime, folks are traveling. I'm seeing some of my Facebook friends, in Punta Cana and other places. So I'm just saying, y'all, if you're going to be over there, be careful. Methanol is a poisonous alcohol that's found in antifreeze. And I don't know if you guys watch, like First 48 or, I Slept with a Killer or Women Who Kill or Snapped or anything. Anything like that, like I do sometimes on the weekend, right, when they have these marathons. Alcohol poisoning by way of antifreeze, oof, that ain't nothing nice. It's a slow, miserable, painful way to go. So if you find yourselves over in the San Jose province, in Costa Rica, if you didn't bring your own alcohol, I'd just be drinking plenty of Pepsi while I'm there. NYPD water bucket arrests, that's what I'm calling it. So they've arrested 3 people and they're looking at some more because of the video. And the people that have been arrested is a 28-year-old by the name of Courtney Thompson. He turned himself in and he's being charged with criminal nuisance, disorderly conduct, and 2 other 28-year-olds, a guy named Isaiah Scott and Chad Bowden, are also charged and facing disorderly conduct, harassment, criminal mischief, and obstructing government administration, because they thought it would be fun to, throw water on police officers who were, there either responding to a woman who had water thrown on her, or because they were trying to effect an arrest of someone else. You may have seen the video. 2 officers were trying to arrest somebody at the hood of a car, and then folks started throwing buckets of water on them. And so listen, it might have been a hot day and it might have looked like, the officers could have used some hydration, but that's not funny because, I don't know about NYPD uniforms, but ours were wool when I was on, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. We wore wool uniforms, and I'm here to tell you, if you poured a bucket of water on me, it would end badly. I'm just saying. Folks, are praising those officers for showing restraint. I don't think I would have been able to have that kind of restraint. That's just me. Talked to some colleagues of mine, and they're kind of the same mindset. Yeah, it would have ended badly. So now these 3 people are facing charges. And listen, because understand this, we are the authority figure. And in my mind, if you don't take control of a situation, if you allow that kind of foolishness to happen, then you can never say no, is how I see it. Because how can anyone have trust and confidence in you that you're going to come and de-escalate and diffuse and resolve conflict when you just you just let somebody throw water on you and you just walk away? What? Because then that makes them think that the next time they see you, because they live there and you work there, that you might want to cool down again. And so yeah, that was just stupid to me. So NYPD now looking for others that they've identified in that video. In Detroit, where my good buddy, former partner, LAPD officer sergeant, when I worked with him, James Craig, he's a police chief over in Detroit, and evidently Detroit is now using facial recognition. They're using facial recognition technology. Now listen, Chief Craig says, that they're going to use it the right way, and we just have to trust him for now. But listen, he's been using this technology for a minute, and it just became known because they use that technology to identify a 34-year-old man who to make an arrest in a situation involving a 34-year-old man who was shot at a gas station on Detroit's east side back in November. And so they used the facial recognition to identify the shooter. Now that's a good thing, but the problem with that is what else are you using facial recognition technology for? And nobody knew about it. And so now, because the gig is up and folks know, now Chief Craig is trying to get some kind of approval after the fact. Wondering if if everything was on the up and up and he felt good about his decision to use this technology, why not let folks know and get the approval and all of that? There's some board that he is now before trying to get authorization to use something he's already using. So, according to Chief Craig, he says that the department can't and won't use the technology to arrest somebody solely on facial recognition. Well, that's what he says, but, I don't know. Because if they do that, what's the recourse, right? The damage is done. You're arrested. However they use the technology, you can't unring that bell, right? Anyway, there's a company called DataWorks, and this is the company that Detroit Police Department has contracted with. And it sounds like the other capability that this technology allows for is some kind of streaming that has to do with mobile cell phones. Somewhere in the contract, it speaks to unlimited mobile streaming capabilities. And so, of course, people who are asking questions want to know, how are you going to be using this technology with mobile phones? Because, listen, Big Brother is a thing, you guys. And, if you have a cell phone, if you're on any kind of social media, if you're like me and you've given up, some privacy, if you will, for expediency. Right now, I'm talking about, like, when I travel and I go to the airport, I kind of joke and say, I've got so doggone much security clearance. When I pass through TSA, all I got to do is just wave my ass, and they just say, "Proceed, Sergeant Dorsey." I've got TSA pre-check, and then I went the step beyond that, and I got clear, right? So now when I go, they scan my iris. Right? I just go to the little machine and put my eye up to the little camera, and they scan it. My picture pops up, and then they take me right to the front of the line, which I like. So I let them scan my iris. And then when I go out of the country, I've got whatever that global re-entry. That didn't seem so intrusive to me. They fingerprint you and all this other stuff, but it's another layer. So when you come back into the U.S., if you've ever come back into the U.S. through LAX, that customs line is like any ride at Disneyland. You're going to spend a day trying to get through customs. And so I have global re-entry so that I can get through that very, very quickly. And I was pleased the last time I went out of the country, because I was through customs in about 10, 15 minutes. And that's from the time it took me to get off my plane. 15 minutes later, I was on the sidewalk. So, we give up stuff for convenience. And yeah, I know that in, other parts of the world, cameras are everywhere and they're constantly taking pictures of you. And, we know that here locally, police officers are driving around and taking pictures of your car and scanning it and running your plate. And sometimes they say that's how they find stolen vehicles, right? They're being proactive. Just running plates willy-nilly as you drive around, not even knowing that people are accessing your information with technology. So, I just tell you that this stuff is going on, but truth be told, there's really not anything that we can do about it, because they're already doing it. In Minneapolis, Mohammed Noor, the Somalian police officer who was fired after he got involved in a deadly shooting. Well, you remember, he was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years. So he's appealing his conviction. And, he's appealing his conviction. Now, it's very expensive to appeal a guilty verdict. And most times you're not successful. I will keep my ear to the ground and let you guys know what happens with his appeal. But his attorneys are saying that the judge in the case of Mohammed Noor erred when he allowed charges not supported by probable cause to go before the jury. The attorney also says that there was prosecutorial misconduct. In other words, kind of like a when they see us situation, right? Prosecutors were doing something that his attorney said they should not have been doing. And so that doesn't mean that, Mohammed Noor didn't violate policy when he shot and killed that woman, but you got to proceed the right way. Otherwise, convictions get overturned. So that's one of the other reasons that they're appealing the conviction. Also, his attorneys say that Noor's right to present a complete defense was limited, and that there were improper instructions given to the jury on that third-degree murder charge. So right now, Noor is in custody. Obviously, he's doing his time, and he's been moved to an undisclosed location out of the state of Minnesota for his own safety, as you might well imagine. Now, while Officer Noor was not so lucky, if you want to call it luck, in Mesquite, Texas last week, there was another officer, a black officer by the name of Derek Wiley, who was found not guilty by a jury of his peers in a fatal shooting. This involved a young man who was not, take that back, it wasn't a fatal shooting, it was just an officer-involved shooting, Lindo Jones. Lindo Jones was shot 3 to 4 times, I think, in the back by Derek Wiley. And what happened with that is Lindo was sitting in his car, I think he was smoking a joint or something, and some business owner called and said they thought this guy was breaking into a car because his alarm kept going off. He was in a pickup truck, and I think his alarm kept going off, and probably because he was smoking a joint, he couldn't figure out how to stop it, right? So the business owner calls the police. That makes sense. That's reasonable. Come and investigate. Guy might be breaking into a car, unfamiliar with it, can't stop the alarm. So Derek Wiley shows up, and he orders Lindo out of the car, and he tells him to get down on the ground, and Lindo's trying to tell him, dude, this is my car. What's up? What's up? That's why you need to comply, you guys. Not blaming Lindo, but you never know if you're going to have an Officer Wiley. So Lindo is trying to explain to him, this is my car, and he's down on the ground, and then for whatever reason, he decides, you know what, I don't think I want to be handcuffed right now, sir. So he tries to get up and starts to run away, and that's when Derek Wiley shoots him in the back 3 times. Shoots him in the back, and he was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, the officer was, and this was back on November 2017 when all of this happened. Now, Lindo Jones was 31, and he sustained some pretty significant injuries. He had 4 broken ribs and a lacerated lung, and he was really, really in a bad way. But he lived, thankfully. And when the jury heard Derek Wiley, Officer Derek Wiley, who lost his job but is now going to appeal his termination because he was found not guilty, Derek Wiley said, hey, you know, I thought this guy was, you know, reaching for a gun or gonna hurt me or whatever he said he thought. And because great deference is given to what a police officer says, juries, 9 times out of 10, Muhammad Noor was the 10th, right? But 9 times out of 10, juries believe what officers say, and juries don't want to second guess an officer who's doing his job, who's doing a dangerous job, even though sometimes officers say, I feared for my safety, or I thought I saw him reaching for something, when maybe they didn't really fear for their safety, but they know that that works. So the jury acquitted Derek Wiley. This was a second trial. The first trial, there was a hung jury, and in that first trial, it was, even though the jury hung, they couldn't come to a unanimous decision. The majority of those in that first trial were in favor of acquitting the officer. And so they took it to trial a second time, and this time he was acquitted. So, you know, part of what also happened in the midst of that trial is that they tried to dirty up Lindo. We see that happen time and time again. You know, usually the person is deceased and they talk about their criminal history if they had one, or they talk about, you know, something that they may have done hours before, days before they got involved with the police. Again, juries are sympathetic to police officers, and so they tried to dirty up Lindo, and I guess they did dirty up Lindo because they talked about the fact that, you know, he was sitting in the car engaged in, you know, using drugs. And they said that the defense said that, you know, if he had just complied, we wouldn't be here today. And the jury in Mesquite, Texas agreed. So Derek Wiley will probably very soon be back in uniform in Mesquite. So if you're in your car or truck and your alarm goes off and you see Derek Wiley show up, don't run. He'll shoot you in the back. Anyway, in other police-related get out of jail free stuff, there was an officer some years ago named Michael Brelo who was involved in this was a crazy pursuit. It involved, you know, hundreds of police officers. And the long and the short of it is there was a couple driving the car. There was a black guy and a female in the car. And there was this 22-mile pursuit. And Michael Brelow was a Cleveland police officer at the time. He was subsequently fired. But when he was fired and charged with the murder of this couple, he took it to a bench trial, which means he had a judge listen to his defense rather than take it to a jury. Now, Brelow was not the only officer that was involved in this shooting. At the end of this police pursuit, there were 137 shots fired. And some of you may remember, because how many times is there a police pursuit where at the end there's 137 shots fired? Killed in that police pursuit were Timothy Russell, who was the driver, and Melissa Williams, the passenger in the car. This happened back in 2014, just before Timothy Lohman on the Cleveland Police Department had shot and killed Tamir Rice. So, you know, Cleveland's been doing some questionable stuff in regards to shootings for a minute, right? But anyway, so that happened. Brelow went to a bench trial. Now, Brelow was the only officer that was charged, even though there were several, and I'll tell you about how many officers were involved in this pursuit. But he was the only one that was charged, and he was charged with 2 counts of voluntary manslaughter. The city of Cleveland eventually settled with the families of Mr. Russell and Miss Williams, $3 million. Buckets of money were thrown at the family, and then Brelow was acquitted. Judge said, you know, I don't know what the judge said. Oh, I know what the judge said. The reason Brelow was acquitted is because the judge said that he couldn't determine which of those 137 bullets actually killed the couple. And since Brelow wasn't the only person that was firing, the only officer that was firing, you know, he couldn't say which bullet killed him. But we know at the end of that pursuit, when the car came to a stop, Brelow said he was so scared, he was so afraid for his own life that he got out of his patrol car, jumped on the hood of Mr. Russell's car, and then fired 15 rounds through the windshield because he was afraid. It was reported that Brelow alone fired 49 rounds. So that means he was emptying magazines and putting in new magazines. We have 15 in a magazine. This dude was going for barrel meltdown. I mean, he's firing so many rounds, and then he's still so frightened, he jumps on the hood of the car, fires 15 more into the windshield. And, you know, I don't know, obviously, like the judge didn't know which bullet actually killed him. So the district attorney, either rightfully or sneakily, didn't take any other officer to trial. So the judge had it easy out. We know that they were killed by police gunfire, but I don't know which one. And this is the only one that I have before me. And so I can't rightly say that he's the one who is responsible for their deaths. So Brelow didn't get his job back, but he didn't go to jail. And so in all of that, there were several internal affairs investigations. And now some of the other people who were involved, some of those other officers that were involved in that police chase, are now having their cases adjudicated administratively. And so real quick, 6 other officers were also fired in January of 2016. Now, some of these officers were plainclothes, obviously not everybody, because it was over 100 officers that were involved in this 22-mile chase. But the reason that this whole thing even began is because someone said that they saw this car in a, air quote, drug area, and they were going to initiate a traffic stop. They ran the license plate, everything was good, but Mr. Russell made a turn and he didn't signal. So that was the probable cause for this 22-mile chase, because when they did try to stop him from making the turn without signaling, he didn't stop. And so as a result of that, people, you know, I just envision folks leaving the police station, jumping in cars from Code 7 lunch, and getting in on this pursuit. And in the midst of that, either when the car stopped or just before it stopped, there was a sound, and they now say it was a backfire. The car backfired, but they thought it was a gunshot. And so because he was, leaving a known drug area, they just opened up, and it was just contagious gunfire. Everybody who was there just started shooting. And 20 seconds later, 137 shots later, these people were dead. So 13 officers wound up being fired. 13 officers allegedly fired these 137 rounds into the car. And Mr. Russell was struck 23 times, and Miss Williams was struck 24 times. And oh, by the way, there was no gun. They never recovered a weapon because they didn't have one. So fast forward to last week, of all the people that had been disciplined, and I'm going to give you the numbers, there were 18 of 46 supervisors that were on duty. 46 supervisors were on duty and involved in that car chase. 46 supervisors. And nobody in that group of 46 could do anything to stop that 137 rounds that were ultimately fired. So 18 of those people were dealt with administratively. They were charged with violations. One was terminated, 2 were demoted, and 12 were given some other kind of penalty. 9 were suspended. Nine of those 46 supervisors were suspended anywhere from 3 to 30 days, okay? It's reported that there were a total of 277 officers that were on duty that day, that evening. And of those 277, 105 stopped what they were doing and got in on that chase. That's crazy to me. That's just crazy to me. So one of the people that got involved was a female supervisor. And so her administrative hearing was just adjudicated. Actually, it was a criminal trial. DOJ got involved, and they said that Cleveland has a pattern of excessive force. That's why you need to report, create a paper trail if you are not happy with the service that you receive from a police department, because every now and again, DOJ, Department of Justice, will get involved and they will issue some kind of a consent decree, some kind of reform that will cause a police department to change their policy. And so DOJ got involved over there on the Cleveland Police Department, and as a result of that, they can no longer chase cars if they're not involved in a felony or a DUI. And they also, can't, shoot folks who are just fleeing. So some good came out of that with regards to the policy. But anyway, so this female supervisor, she was a passenger in a car with a detective, and they jumped into this multi-car 22-mile pursuit. And so they charged this female with some kind of neglect. Her name is Patricia Coleman. And she went before a Cuyahoga County grand jury, and she was indicted back in 2014. So this thing has been winding through the judicial system for quite some time now. But then last week on Friday, a jury found that she was not guilty of dereliction of duty. That's what she was ultimately charged with, dereliction of duty. And the reason that the jury said that she was not guilty is because her defense was, first of all, she was a passenger in a car. She was not driving. At some point, she got lost in the pursuit. They couldn't keep up with them. And she was never one who fired any of those 137 rounds. So the jury decided that she should not be charged with dereliction of duty. And so she was acquitted not only of that, but also looks like she might have been facing second-degree misdemeanor charge of something. Maybe that's the dereliction of duty. She's been on restricted duty, the Sergeant Patricia Coleman. She's been on restricted duty since 2014, and so now she gets to go back, get in on the next 22-mile pursuit that jumps off. While all of this is going on, the mayor over there in Cleveland, Mayor Frank Jackson, said that he was very pleased with the arbitrator's ruling. He believed that the arbitrator decided justly that Brelo should remain off the force because Brelo, even though he was acquitted in that bench trial and had been fired, he was appealing his termination. And so the arbitrator said, no, you can't come back. So the mayor says that he agrees with that. And he also says that he's pleased that the arbitrator confirmed that 70 of the violations committed by the officers were upheld, and that terminations were upheld for Brelo and others, as well as lengthy suspensions were upheld. There were 6 officers who were not terminated, but were suspended from 3 to 30 days. So the mayor says, you know, he's really happy about that. It sounds like code talk to me. It sounds like double speak, because on the one hand, you know, the mayor is praising the arbitrator, you know, for keeping Brelo off the job, but the mayor doesn't have a problem with the 107 other people, with the 13 other officers who were involved in the shooting, who many of them may still be on the job. So I don't know how bothered Mayor Jackson really was, but that's what he said. So anyway, there's that. Now here locally, LA Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Alex Villanueva, this dude here, he's something else, you guys. For the people that are here locally, if you've been following the news, you know Alex Villanueva, he was just elected into office, and he made all these promises and proclamations about what he was going to do and how he was going to stop cronyism and clean up corruption within LASD, and not so much, because the first thing he did was hire one of his buddies who was on his campaign, who's an alleged wife whooper. He gave him his job back, and the board of supervisors are hot about that, and there's all kind of legal wrangling going on, because they're saying that this guy should not have been reinstated or rehired as a deputy, but Alex Villanueva, he did. And so now there's more, you know, rumblings, if you will, because Alex Villanueva has a son, and his name is Johannes, I believe. And he's applied for the sheriff's department. Well, they found out young Villanueva, you know, he did what young people do, and, you know, got involved in some stuff and didn't make always good decisions, got behind the wheel of a car drunk, drove, got caught, convicted of DUI, and was given a program to attend and placed on probation. And during that probationary period, he didn't go to the program as ordered a couple of times. And evidently, if you're the son of the sheriff, you get the homie hookup. Because now 33-year-old Johannes Jared Villanueva is a sheriff deputy trainee, soon to join the sheriff's department. And people are just wondering, how does that work? Now, I read the story first, and then I saw Villanueva on a local news station here kind of explaining that. And he goes, well, you know, it was 10 years ago, and, you know, there's certain misdemeanors that you can get involved in, be convicted of, and still become a deputy. What? The sheriff's department has always conducted itself very differently from LAPD, even when I was, you know, a young pup, if you will, and Sheriff Sherman Block was running the sheriff's department back then. And, you know, I came on under Gates, and, you know, there was all kind of things the sheriffs could do. And we used to be like, what the? And, you know, we couldn't do that kind of stuff and not suffer some kind of administrative repercussion. But nonetheless, several sheriffs later, Baca, McConnell, I think he tried to do a little bit better and have a tighter rein on his deputies. He's a former LAPD command staff officer, went over there, and then he lost in the election last year to Villanueva, who's the insider. And so now Villanueva, he's about to give his son the homie hookup. Listen, I know people who have been trying to get on the sheriff's department, who have called me and, you know, wanted to, while I'm not a sheriff, they're kind of all same. And so I was offering some insight into what I thought, you know, they could say or do in order to get through that process. And listen, if you don't know how many bubbles are in a bar of soap, because that's what they ask people who look like me, yeah, you got a hard way to go. But evidently, if you are the son of the sheriff and you've been arrested for DUI, you get the homie hookup. So that's that. On to LAPD. And evidently, LAPD is still investigating Nipsey Hussle. Now, it sounds like on the one hand, they were praising Nipsey and saying what a great job he was doing over there in the Crenshaw District area, and, you know, anti-gang efforts, advocacy work. But it sounds like they were investigating him on the down low, right? And even though Nipsey has been killed, it's continuing. And so for those of you that are here locally, you understand what's going on over there in that area. Gentrification is a real thing, and I think they just went into third gear, right? They just went from second to third over there. And so LAPD is investigating Nipsey Hussle, and there's like some kind of an abatement situation going on. And with this abatement or nuisance investigation, what can happen is that the city can seize your property. Now, I don't know if that's what they're really trying to do, but why are you investigating a man who's deceased? But to say that there's all kind of gang activity that was going on around that corner, Nipsey Square, right? Because just like they named it, they can unname it if they want to. They can pull that flag down and continue on with that gentrification thing and seize that whole corner if they're able to show that gang activity is a problem over there and it's a nuisance, and they can evict the tenants that are in those businesses that might remain open, because Marathon clothing store is closed, and I don't believe that will ever open again. That's just me. But it just sounds like to me, and I say this because somebody asked me, you know, what do you think? So this is what I think. I think this is just a really kind of sneaky way for, well, maybe not sneaky because they could do it legitimately, right? But it's a way for the city to evict and seize that property because they say that it's a nuisance. So there's an article in the LA Times that speaks to that. And, you know, that's just my 2 cents. In New Jersey, there's an officer, let's just call him Billy Badass. There's a New Jersey officer who was caught on video saying that he had beat some young black guy, but he didn't call him a young black guy. He said, I beat this N-word like he owed me money. And I guess it was not just one person that he was very aggressive and abusive with. And so now, because of that, Frank Toledo, a New Jersey officer, just pled guilty in U.S. District Court over in Newark to conspiracy to violate people's civil rights, using excessive force, filing a false police report. He lied. He justified whatever probable cause, reasonable suspicion to arrest someone in the first place. And he's facing up to 40 years in federal prison. And here's how he did it. Toledo and a couple of other officers, one named Matthew Torres, Yudi Ramos, Daniel Pent, and Jonathan Bustios, have all been charged. And what they would do is they would stop people. They'd stop people in cars. They wouldn't have any justification, no probable cause, thus the lying, right, to create probable cause. They'd stop people in cars. They'd search the cars without justification. And then they would steal. They'd steal stuff from the people that they found in their cars, any valuables or cash that the person had on them. They would steal it, and then they would divvy it up amongst themselves. And in one instance, there was a young man who tried to run, and that's where the whole I beat this in like he owed me money came from. It was a juvenile who had been handcuffed even when he beat him like he owed him money. And so they have evidence of that, and that's why I guess Billy Badass, Frank Toledo, pled guilty. So I'm just wondering, you know, when that ass gets, you know, in federal prison, if somebody will be beating him like he owes them money. We'll see. I'll keep you posted. I'll let you know. In addition, you know, to whatever video they may have found, there were also text messages, because these guys are stupid, right? They're sending text messages to one another about, you know, their shenanigans, the things that they were involved in and how they were abusing people and just kind of bragging and, you know, boasting. Bustios, in a text message after they beat up this juvenile, said that, you know, he said he unleashed on this juvenile and that he was no longer a cop in his mind. I guess he's, you know, blacked out or whatever. He just beat this kid because he could. So Um, Frank Toledo is facing 40 years in federal prison now. Um, and he hasn't been sentenced, but that's what he's facing. So I'll keep you posted, and I'll let you know what ultimately happens when that thing is finally resolved. And yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Thank you guys for sticking around with me tonight. I'm gonna go hydrate now. We've been at this for a minute, but I want to just say I thank you for coming in. I thank you for your comments. I thank you for your words of encouragement and support. Hashtag tell a friend. For those of you who don't know about me, if you want to support what it is that I do, visit my website, www.sgtdorseyspeaks, sergeantdorseyspeaks.com. Visit my website. You can purchase my book there. You can also just make a donation if you appreciate what I do and want to see that I continue in my efforts. sergeantdorseyspeaks.com. Also, sergeantcheryldorsey.com is my kind of main website, and you can go there. You can also read the first chapter of my book, Black and Blue, behind me, The Creation of a Social Advocate, as well as my third volume, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Whistleblower. Remember, I can't make it available just yet because my civil suit against LAUSD, where I talk about being a whistleblower, because being a whistleblower, whether you're on the police department or you work for a school district or you work for a hospital, it's all same. There are no real protections, and folks come after you when you tell, right? So I talk about that. You can read the first chapter and the first chapter only, because I can't let it out just yet. Case was continued, and I don't have a new court date because I don't know if they're trying to wear me out and wear me down, but until I go to trial, I'm not going to make it available for them. But you can read the first chapter, and for those of them that might be listening, you too, sir, can read the first chapter, because I understand that they follow my social media and they monitor what it is I do and say. So anybody who wants to know a little bit about being a whistleblower and what that looks like, and kind of what you should do if you are in a situation where you're being harassed, retaliated against, discriminated against, while I speak in great detail in my book. If you want to just reach out to me and ask me, what are the first 2 or 3 steps you should take if you are the victim of that, sergeantdorseyspeaks@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you. Follow me on Twitter, Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Follow me on Instagram, Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Subscribe to my YouTube, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. Follow me, subscribe here on Facebook, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. And until next week, you guys, you know what's up. Be good. Be safe.